Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Today is the second in our trilogy of the My Dark Night of the Soul. And this one is entitled Vajrasafta Heals. Vajrasafta was a Buddhist retreat held in the hills south of San Francisco. It was a 5-day retreat that I signed up for. And it basically had a great reputation. I was reputedly one of the most powerful healing and purification techniques in Vajrayana Buddhism. Um, I learned about the retreat in one of my meditation groups, and it was highly recommended. This was a, but it was a new concept for me, and I didn't know much about Buddhism. I had, of course, studied it in the big picture over the years, and knew its principles and much of the history of it, but I wasn't a practitioner. I didn't get into the details of it. So I was looking forward to learning what I could, but it wasn't my primary motivation. The cleansing ritual was one offering in the program, and but the majority was meditation sessions led by the Buddhist monks themselves, and there were several of them in attendance. So this was a real attraction for me. As you might recall, my meditation program was absolutely devastated by the Great Downturn. I lost my ability to even meditate for the most part, and I was making a little bit of a comeback. I had joined AA and basically was getting sober, which was part of it. Another part of it was I was actually practicing surrender, which I was learning through the AA program, which was seemed to be really helpful to me. I had the support of not only AA but two meditation groups that I had joined, and this is just kind of a quick rehash of what we learned in part one. But my skills as a meditator were pretty good, I thought, until I couldn't meditate any longer. So I was looking forward to working with the monks and actually talking to them on a one-on-one basis to explore what happened to me and to see if I could understand what they may be able to offer me, or see if they had recommendations that would bring me up at least a notch in my practice. So that was my primary motivation for going to the retreat. I got there and got checked in on the first day, or the night before, and the first morning began with a meditation session early in the morning, I think about 6 a.m., maybe even earlier. And from the beginning, small things began to show up during meditations that captivated me. During that first early morning session, the monk guiding the session instructed us to, while in meditation, step out of our bodies and turn around to view our bodies and take note of what we were seeing. I was amazed. I had done lots of using my imagination for such activities, and so I was pretty familiar with how to direct my imagination around. And but I was amazed by what happened next. I actually had an out-of-body experience. I wasn't using my imagination. My being stood up, separated from the physical body, and turned around, and I could see all the details of my physical body, as well as everyone else in the room. But I absolutely knew I was having an out-of-body experience. This was not a an exercise in imagination. So I stood before this meditating Frank, this body that was sitting there, and or this physical body that was sitting there. And I looked at him closely, and I felt his pain and suffering, and I had great empathy and compassion for him and what he was going through. My heart ached for him, uh, but I saw him almost as a stranger, not me. And while I witnessed his pain, it was not my pain. I had no pain at all. I felt serene, at peace. Something strange here, something strange was really going on here, but it was beautiful and it was absolutely happening. Surely this must have been my higher self, I thought. So thus began a whole series of extraordinary events that took place during this 5-day session. So we'll go into some more of those. I caution you that words fail me to explain some of the activities here. They were just so surreal. The whole period of time, and even after I left and went home and continued to practice what I learned, I had some of these surreal experiences, and I'll describe them as best I can. But there was just a high level of engagement and um, experience and knowing that it just is beyond words to explain. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. Well, I was still glowing all the way up through the morning and through lunch. And we had a 30-minute lunch break where we could go outside, and it was a warm spring morning, and there was a deck, and we were permitted to speak because this was a silent, a whole silent retreat. So I sat on the south deck, so we were facing sunshine, and I was surrounded by 3 other men, and I was just feeling wonderful, and the best I could remember feeling in I don't know how long. It just had been, it was just extraordinary. I was uplifted, and I was feeling gratitude and love, and just everything was just perfect. So um, after after sitting there for a few moments, a butterfly landed and rested on my hand, my left hand actually, as I recall the details of it. And again, I was uplifted by the morning's events, and I was still in a state of grace. And so, on a lark, I began to silently talk to the butterfly, and I told him I was grateful for his visit and the beauty he was allowing me to feel. Of course, I was pretty jacked up on my own feelings and just um, and so I shared that with this butterfly, and thinking this that I'd made a new friend, I silently told him that I wanted him to fly from my left hand to my right hand when I said the word now. And so I gave him the command, and he flew from my left hand to my right hand. And I thought, oh, well, this is just a serendipitous fluke of some type. And so I I let him land and get perched as pretty much in place. And then I silently gave him the command again to fly back to my other hand. And I did it a few times, and he continued to respond each time I would say now. And again, I was doing this in silence. People weren't hearing me. But there were 3 guys that I had been sitting next to, and we'd been in the meditations all together that morning. And one said, "Looks like you've made a new friend." And I responded, "Yes, I did. And this butterfly does tricks." And they all laughed. And I told them when I communicated to the butterfly, he would fly to the other hand. And I would just, when I say the word now, watch him fly over. And they all chuckled. and I would have as well. So this time I did speak aloud, and with each utterance, each time I said the word now, the butterfly changed hands on cue. Well, our performance sent everyone back into the silent mode. No one had any words or questioned that or even know what to say. They were stunned. So I gave the butterfly a blessing and sent him on his way, and then it was time to start class. It was a wonderful experience. Okay, let's move on. Well, either this was no ordinary butterfly, or I was just in an extraordinary state of consciousness, um, or it was both an extraordinary butterfly and I was in an extraordinary state of consciousness. Or was it existence consciousness, or God consciousness raising me up to this higher dimension, and an extension of the being state that began with my out-of-body experience that morning. So, because the glow of love and gratitude was present, I used the term being state. And this is a state I've incorporated into all of my teachings, by the way. Um, and I think it's so important, especially when we're setting intentions. I'm getting a little off track here, but I wanted to tell you that along the way I picked up so many things that I've used in my meditation teachings that were just small things, but this just turned out to be one major teaching session for me. So to describe what some might call bliss or experiencing a cellular frequency or vibration is what I mean by the being state. And turns out I'd be in this state for almost all of this retreat. The teacher's name of the actual Buddhism or the Vajrasattva um, protocols was a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Laidlaw, and he'd wrote a book called Buddhism for Dummies, and I'd read it before I actually went to the retreat. So he would lead us in the Vajrasattva cleansing. So with 40 years of Buddhism training, he was pretty fully qualified to guide us through the ritual. So for the next 3 days, we would begin at 1 p.m. After all of our morning meditations and finish around 9 p.m. in the evening. So in addition to the morning meditations that lasted until lunchtime, we had a pretty full schedule, a pretty full day. And I can tell you, I was glowing throughout every day. So let's move on here. So we received instruction in the afternoon about what we would practice in the evening after dinner, typically. So it was normally pretty substantial, um, and it was different for me because I wasn't, there was a lot of prayer that was using, language that I was unfamiliar with, um, and I don't know if it was, I don't know exactly what language it was being delivered in, but it was difficult. So it was hard for me to connect and keep my concentration on the teachings themselves. So so the first evening, the we after receiving the instruction, we um, came into the main meditation room, and the professor started going through the techniques, and we were to project this image of Vajrasattva, and we were told to visualize him in that session. And so I did, and I had a strong visual in my mind of this Indian deity. So my concentration seemed to be returning, and I was thankful for that. It was much stronger than it had been, frankly, in years, at least since the beginning of the Great Downturn. So again, I was pretty happy because it was just a continuation of a day that was going so well. Okay, let's move on. Well, the next morning I went through meditation classes and nothing extraordinary happened, but I was still feeling pretty good and still glowing somewhat. And so in the afternoon we went and we practiced the chants and the teachings and the prayers we were going to go through that night, and the meaning of the ritual and the meditation. So there was a lot of ritual around this particular karmic cleansing activity. So I have to be brutally honest. It was getting kind of monotonous for me, as most of the chants were not in English, and there was no translation. So I don't know what the intent of the prayers were, or the chants, and so it kind of left me. Perhaps I was the lone person in the audience, because many of them were practitioners of Buddhism and followed it pretty closely. So um, anyway, around 7 p.m. we were again asked to visualize Vajrasattva and meditate on him. And I had been sitting there all afternoon and now through the evening, and I was kind of prepared for more boredom. And so I began sort of getting my mind around the idea that this isn't, it's going to be anticlimactic, I think is the word I would best use to best describe it. So I began to visualize a deity I had the night before, um, and I got to say, I could only use these words as I brought them into my awareness. Um, it was like a whoa Nelly moment. I could see an image through my closed eyes. We were in a meditative state with our eyes closed, and he was hovering in the air about 18 inches from the center of my forehead. And he was alive. He was about 8 inches tall, and he was in a seated, cross-legged position and radiating a mesmerizing phosphorescent blue light all around. I mean, it was an incredible image. One I hadn't visualized the night before. I'd visualized the image, but not in this kind of detail, not with this phosphorescent blue light all around it. And like I said, it was mesmerizing. So that was the image of Vajrasattva. Then did something incredible. It descended until it was about even with my rib cage. And as I watched it through my closed eyelids, um, the my chest opened up, and I could see nothing in my chest other than my heart, and it was just flooded with blue light. The entire interior cavity of my chest was filled with blue light. Then he floated over and embraced my heart. He wrapped his arms and his legs around my heart and laid his head upon it. I was blown away. I was overwhelmed with love and serenity, so much so that the 1 hour meditation ended and the lecture began again. And I just remained steadfastly in this meditative state. I couldn't come out of it. And I could hear the professor's voice softly in the background, continuing on with the lesson, but I wasn't paying any attention to that. I was having this most wonderful of wonderful experiences. Um, and the next thing I knew, everyone was moving out of the room, and the sanctuary lights were being turned off. So 2.5 hours had passed, and the blue light in my chest finally went dark, and it was over. Um, it was interesting. None of the people sitting around me or whatever told me it was over. They just left me to be, which was I was thankful for, because I certainly didn't want to be interrupted in this magnificent event that was taking place. I was back up to the feeling that deep gratitude and humility, and I vowed to be open from that moment on to whatever else happened next. I was convinced that I was in some magical place. Everything was turning up roses, so to speak, and it was just, it was fascinating. It was real. It was something I knew in my experience, and it was incredible. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the next couple of days were to the end of the retreat were filled with the same basic experience. In the evening, we were asked to envision Vajrasattva, and he showed up the next 2 nights for me, and we did a similar thing. The meditations weren't as intensive in terms of length of time. They lasted about an hour, which was the prescribed time, but something different began to happen. I was beginning to see oily smoke come out of my body, all the pores of my body, and surround me like I was in a cloud somewhere. And I thought this was pretty unusual, and that happened 2 nights in a row. Well, on the second day, we were informed that if we had experienced the effects of the cleansing, we might see oily smoke. Well, that of course had already taken place for me, so I wasn't. I was surprised that they confirmed what actually was taking place for me. So um, I went home and I was still pretty jacked up, and I decided that my meditation practices, I would try and repeat what I had learned, get into a meditative state, and continue on with what I learned. Although I didn't know the chants and I didn't know the prayers, and but I would invoke an image. I would get in a meditative posture, invoke an image of Vajrasattva, and he would come, and my chest would open up, and we were at it once again. And so I performed my own version of the cleansing, and I was absolutely amazed for the next few days. For the next 4 days, the sessions lasted from 3 to 5 hours per session. I had absolutely no awareness of the time as it was happening. And throughout this entire time, this oily smoke kept coming out of me, and it would was and it was all accompanied by such wonderful feelings of love and serenity. And the other component is I would sob for hours each day. I was just so thankful. I was just overwhelmed and relieved, and I knew I was being cleansed. It was a karmic cleansing. It was just spectacular that it had these proponents to it that I could actually experience. The oily smoke, the sobbing of happiness, really. I mean, just pure delight and hard to explain. So, it was exhausting as it was exhilarating. And again, Vajrasattva was present for each session and guided me each step of the way. So I didn't really need to know the ritual. I didn't need to know the prayers or the chants. And um, so on the fifth day, I re-engaged, and it was over. He didn't come. There was no more oily smoke. There was no Vajrasattva, and my meditations returned to a normal state. By the way, that was new. I hadn't had meditation of any length for some time, but my clarity of mind had returned, my ability to focus had returned, all of the things that had been missing that had left me over that 5 years were back. So, well, this whole journey had taken place, um, and since uh, um, well, it had taken place really in a 1 week time frame, and so what began as an exploration for me and a healing, uh, I didn't actually expect a healing when I went there. What I expected was to learn something about mostly meditation to get to expand my practice and keep it going forward. And what happened was I had really a complete transformative healing that allowed me to meditate again. It brought back all of everything that was missing. And and to boot, I discovered over the next 4 months I was on a path to enlightenment, just by following all of the insights and revelations that had became known to me from each one of those Vajrasattva meditations. So I had a great, as a result of the great downturn, all of those terrible events that had come in, and um, and the subsequent events, I gained clarity and insight and understanding into my connection to existence consciousness. And I discovered a replicable method through which I could access existence consciousness. And there was a new component. I could now ask questions of existence consciousness and receive answers or information back. Yeah, pretty big deal. And I learned how to do it. I also later learned that anyone can do it, and I teach it now in my with my students or whoever, or in my videos and in my lectures. So I understood what the being state was, and I understood how to return to it. And now I've added this whole new component. I could inquire and get answers. I would ask a question and simply be quiet until the answer came in. And I gained a deeper, more nuanced understanding of what it meant to be on the road to enlightenment. It was quite spectacular. By the way, I was told later on, I ran into the professor, and we're having a discussion. I give him the details. He hadn't really had anybody ever report to him this kind of experience. And I also talked to him about the oily smoke. He says, yeah, he says, that was actually your chakras cleansing. He says, he said, what had happened was your chakras had really stopped working. They had, and they were so completely paralyzed. I think he used another term but from your traumas that they were whatever energy was there was stagnant and and that was the oily experience or the oily smoke that was being removed from the chakras. So the stagnant the stagnant energy in the chakras that had stopped working was removed so they could return to functionality. That was his explanation, and I thought it was a pretty good one. And subsequently, I have read other opinions that validate that. Let's move on. So I'm just going to kind of repeat some of the things I've already told you here because I think they're so important. Again, why my journey transpired over the next 4 months, where I thought I was healing, I realized that I had really healed in that 1 week or slightly longer. I think it was about 9 or 10 day period between my meditations at home and at the retreat. And what began as an exploration became a path to enlightenment during that time. And all of the revelations and insights became known to me in the next 4 months. I had gone into self-inquiry, and when I mentioned to you that I began asking questions or knew or learned that I could and get answers, um, that was just a component of meditation I'd never used before. Of course, the ancients have known this for years, and self-inquiry leads to self-realization. And I had spent, the previous 40 years using my meditation program or practice to create things for my businesses. I would get in these deep states of meditation. I had spectacular results with my business, so I was pretty good. Where I was deficient was in the spiritual side of my practice. This got me caught up in a way, or put me back on a path in a way where I was getting some balance in my life. I stopped using the my practice for creation of material things, and I started using it exclusively for the exploration of my spiritual nature. So I gained clarity and insight and understanding into myself through this self-inquiry, and I did it by asking the questions of existence consciousness. Now, subsequently, I've learned that we get information from other sources besides just a greater field of consciousness. We have a subconscious where we store a ton of information that we know that we don't know in our conscious minds, but we know in our subconscious. And we also have a soul where our past lives are stored, and there's a wealth of information there that we reach out to and get through self-inquiry. So anyway, I discovered that I could replicate my ability to ask easy questions in my normal everyday practice and receive information. I understood what the being state is and how to return to this state and use it for purpose. I gained a much more nuanced and subtle understanding of what it means to be enlightened. And I also gained the ability to be able to teach this to others. Magnificent. It was a magnificent turning point in my life. I can't say that I enjoyed the 5-year great downturn, but I can tell you that the outcome from the pain and the suffering of that time has paid me back in ways that are too great to count with any worldly possessions, or it's just not in this world. It's out of this world, and that's what's so fascinating and beautiful about it. It was a spiritual journey that continues and grows. Thank you. Okay, I want to mention a few other things here, and we're coming close to a close. In the end, the Great Downturn really manifested itself into a magnificent lens for me in which I could identify my true purpose. And it was an epiphany that transformed me from a financial failure to a whopping spiritual success. Um, I had awakened to a much greater understanding and was jubilant. I could accept the unveiling of this reality because it was fed to me in small chunks by existence consciousness through my self-inquiries and the communication I had developed there. It was real, and it was a truth too great to ignore. It was a new purpose was developing in my life, and what I finally came to realize is that my great downfall was a near-death soul experience, or a near soul death experience, I probably should say. A living death of everything I had once been identified with. And that had to get killed off in order for me to have this greater understanding and experience. So during the 5 years I lost my connection to my higher self, I was, practically speaking, soul dead. Somewhere between grief for the loss of what had been, and and a severe depression because I lost it. It was like I was mourning, a death. I did not know what my true condition should be. Somewhere between I was somewhere between an incredibly sad caterpillar and a beautiful butterfly, probably is a good metaphor. So um, it was painful, but it was an incredible experience. Before I completely wrap up here, I do want to give you a little insight into the next installment, and I'll refer to this again probably later on. But a peak meditation experience can sometimes be described by a more common term as a vision. One definition of a vision is something that's seen in a dream or a trance or a supernatural appearance that usually conveys a revelation or a spiritual experience. And that, of course, is what I've been describing to you throughout this entire presentation today. But now we're going to go into a little more depth in the next in number 3, the what is a peak meditation experience. So again, I'm available to help you with your practice. You can reach me by going to peakmeditationexperiences.com, and let's move on. Okay, well, this brings us to the end of our part 2 of the Trilogy, and I just want to thank you for coming and sharing your time with us, and listening to this knowledge. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share it with you, really, and it's been very powerful. It's had a great impact on a number of people, and there's nothing really new here. It's just my experience, which validates which all of the old wisdom traditions have talked about for thousands of years. And people that become enlightened have pretty much the same experiences. So I'm trying to say it, put it in my words in a way that's can be spoken in lay terms that's easily understood. And in the end, enlightenment is just a process of obtaining spiritual knowledge, and the fastest way to do that is through self-inquiry. So, if this particular slide or presentation had any impact I'd like you to take away, it's that learning to self-inquire is really all roads pass through self-inquiry to get to enlightenment. All right. Again, thanks for coming, and we'll see you. We'll see you in the next slide or the next part of the presentation, Peak Meditation Experiences. Thanks.